The Haunted Mansion has reopened with a completely rebuilt exterior queue and some changes to the ride itself. Now, at first look, the queue looks just about as it did before, but there's actually some really interesting changes. Same for on ride, where most of the attraction is as it was, with one or two small changes throughout, but one potentially very big change that could be a game changer for Haunted Mansion fans. Let's do a before and after comparison at Haunted Mansion Holiday. Footage on the top is the before footage. Footage on the bottom right is today's footage. And the first thing you'll notice missing from the mansion entrance is the jack that used to appear at the top left corner over the top left column. I believe that he will return, though. I believe at some point they will put Jack back up there. When that side of the construction is finished, you'll notice that there's still a construction wall right there on that left side, and they probably just can't get to that correctly or adequately. The sign itself looks to be the same. Some minor changes to the decorations around it, and where they used to have candles on that right column, there is now a lamp on the top right, which personally I kind of like that. I kind of like that lamp, and that lamp is going to be featured elsewhere in the queue. As we pass under the arch, you'll notice that they have changed the signage for Lightning Lane and Standby, although it's not complete. They haven't actually; those are just placeholders, I'm sure. Once they install Lightning Lane, they will change those, because there is no Lightning Lane right now, so they can't put Standby on the left and Lightning Lane on the right signs there as of yet. When Lightning Lane does become active, those will be updated, I'm sure. We'll enter into the queue itself, and the first thing we're going to talk about is that fountain on the left. Obviously, that was not there before. Before, it was just a lot of green grass. The fake green grass, remember, they installed that new for the 2023 season. Then as soon as they installed that, they tore it out and replanted it again, planted, quote unquote, for the 24 season. It also looks like that space might be a little bit smaller than it used to be. That's a very wide expanse of grassy area there, unused. That could be where they provided some of the real estate for a change that we're going to get to next. Not a big deal, but something to be observed. But where there was just empty grass before, there is now a fountain, and you guys might recognize that fountain as the fountain that was in Magnolia Park. To be determined whether or not they put water back in there. It's doubtful, I would say. I mean, I would love it if they did. Fountains are going to be a part of this queue. There's other fountains to be installed elsewhere when they're finished. I would hope that they put water in at least one of the two of them, perhaps. But for now, there's no water running. But it is nice. I appreciate Disney preserving that fountain in some capacity and making use of it here in the Haunted Mansion queue. That is tradition for Disney, to take remembrances of the old attraction and put it in the new updated attraction. You'll also notice that where there was pure grass before, they have now added some actual, the grass is fake, but this landscaping over here to its left is not. That is real. They are drought tolerant plants, so it's nice that they're giving life to this queue where there was none before, but also in a way that doesn't use a lot of water, which is always a major concern. We'll advance down the queue a little bit more and look to our right. In the old footage, when they updated the queue, with the fake grass in 2023, they also updated this space to the right of the queue, which was basically just landscaping. There was no feature to it at all. Today, obviously, they have added the hearse. They have moved the hearse from in front of the mansion to the side. As you walk up, it's to your right as you walk up that first path. There's a reason for that. I thought it was to allow guests to take photos, and maybe perhaps they still could. But no, that is not the reason. There is a technical reason, a very good reason, which we'll get into in just a minute. But make note of that. The hearse is now on that path to the right. And this is the area where I was talking about when they needed to provide a little bit of real estate. There was some real estate there. The landscaping that is there is actually still there. If you look at it from outside the queue, you can see still there's a very large grassy area. And by the way, there was no grass there before. They have added grass to that space behind the hearse as well as the landscaping. So where did they get that real estate to place that hearse? I'm guessing is from that big, expansive, grassy area on the guest's left as they enter. Coming back to the entrance, you'll notice that in 2023 there were 3 lanes, very narrow though, 3 very narrow lanes. Left lane was standby, middle lane was lightning lane, and the right lane was a guest exit. Guests with disabilities, wheelchairs, scooters, that kind of thing, they would exit the queue from that far right lane. Today there are still 3 lanes, but they've replaced, first of all, they replaced the chains, the stanchions with chains with rails, new rails with gold handrails on top. There are still 3 lanes, except now it is, by my guess, functionality speaking, which we'll get to again in a second, left lane, standby, middle lane is now the exit, and the right lane is for lightning lane, which we'll see in a minute. As you walk up this path and approach the mansion there, you can see lightning lane scanners. That is where the hearse used to be, is in that little space there, which they've actually replanted and redone all the brickwork there. Lightning lane scanners are here inside the queue now as opposed to outside. This is a very good update, a very positive update for 2 major reasons. One, as I just mentioned, they're no longer out in the front, which causes traffic jam. It blocks the entrance. All those guests, scanning their lightning lanes were blocking the entrance. It was confusing for a guest to try to figure out, where do I go if I want to go standby? How do I, you had to navigate those guests just to get into the queue. Very confusing. Second, this now I would imagine is going to change the mix point for lightning lane guests and standby. It used to be that standby and lightning lane mixed in the rear queue, the exterior queue on the side of the house. Now they're going to mix right here at the entrance, and those lightning lane guests are going to go straight into the door. They're going to go up the steps and into the mansion, which is a benefit. It's good for lightning lane. It's a bit of a shorter walk. It's a shorter, route to the front of the house, but it's also going to allow for more space for guests in the standby queue in the rear part of the queue, where lightning lane was occupying some of that space. They can now save all of that space for standby in the rear queue. And why this is important is because now Disney was able to make the queue more purpose-built for modern use. It's always better when you can build something from the ground up the way it's supposed to be, rather than trying to convert an old system into a new system. Like trying to put projections on the Space Mountain. It doesn't really work because it wasn't built for that. So as hard as they try, it just doesn't work. But it works really great when you do projections on Rise of the Resistance because it was purpose-built for that. That was their plan from the very beginning. They had to wedge Lightning Lane into that classic old Haunted Mansion queue structure, and it didn't work very well. It was very confusing, and they kind of forced it into that. Now it's more natural. It works as it should. It works more naturally, as intended. So I approve this, and even though they had to move the hearse, it's not a big deal. The hearse is still there, and it's just on the guest right now. And by the way, those Lightning Lane guests are going to, in fact, get a very good chance to take a picture in front of that hearse, whereas I don't think that standby guests will get as good a chance to take that picture. Let's go back once more to the walk-in to note that they've also redone the pavement, the walking surface. It used to be just a very plain gray basic concrete with occasional patterns of brick separating sections. Now you've got these gray paving stones with a little bit of texture, as well as the same brick sections, creating a little bit of a pattern, creating a little bit of definition. This, again, is an improvement. I like this. I like that Disney's moving away. We've seen this in other cases, like at Tiana's in Magic Kingdom, and also at Toontown, the entrance to Toontown. So that's the path towards the mansion. Let's make that U-turn and head to the rear queue, where it is quite a bit like it was before. Instead of the chains, though, it is now the same green rail with the golden handrail at the top. Looking at the Pet Cemetery is actually almost identical, nearly identical to how it was before. They did a really good job of matching how it was before. Every pet headstone is represented. There are none missing. and they are in mostly the same place, more or less. I mean, I'm sure they couldn't get it exactly right. The only thing that's changed really is some of the landscaping. One of the things that I liked about the new setup was how they were able to set up Fifi's headstone. There's Fifi, and they made it look more like an actual grave with the definition of the purple landscaping around. Like, you can actually see sort of a grave marking there. But otherwise, this is almost identical. Now, one thing that I noticed when I was walking on this space the second time, well, let's wind back. Do you guys recall during our construction video, I said that wall, when they first started building the brick walls, and we were seeing these walls from the Mark Twain, I said, man, those are really high. Those look like they could be like waist-high walls. And I even counted them. In the original brick wall, they were about 3 bricks high. 3 horizontal bricks and then another brick placed on its side. So 4 bricks high. Whereas the new wall was being built up to 8 bricks high. Also, looking down to the right, you can see that they're progressively getting higher. Where in the old setup, it was 3 bricks high along the entire length of that part of the queue, reaching its top height at the very end of the queue before you turn right into the rear queue. But as I watched guests go by, it wasn't waist high. It was still calf high. Conclusion is that you're going uphill. They have created a grade, and I felt this on the second trip through. They've created a grade where you're going slightly uphill, and then you reach a new height at the end of that path. This is most likely necessary. They had to do this because they had to raise ground level in the rear queue in order to do whatever it is that they're doing back there vis-a-vis the building the new elevator and making whatever changes they were to the cast member break room. All that stuff happening backstage. They probably found it necessary to raise ground level somehow because they had to put something at the bottom. I'm not sure, but there was some reason for them to do that. So in order to get those guests to that level, they had to do a slight grade increase as you walk up the path to the pet cemetery. And you can kind of feel it in your feet when you walk down that path. So I felt like that was kind of interesting. It's nothing that's going to change your experience, but still interesting nonetheless to see that change happen. And it does explain why we have an 8 brick high wall now instead of a 4 brick high wall. And that is the exterior queue. We're going to do another one of these when they finish the rear queue and when they finish whatever they're doing in Magnolia Park. But that is the changes to date at the front half of the exterior queue. Let's get into the mansion and see what changes there are, which is very exciting, obviously, because it's been 7 months since we've been able to join any kind of Haunted Mansion. This experience, though, was identical. It was so comforting and so nice to be able to just go into the foyer, hear the speech, watch the scene in the stretching room happen, and just the way it always has. One thing that has been popular to note is that if we pay close attention to what's happening in that scene, in the rafters, when Jack pops out, you can see the hanging ghost. The hanging ghost, the ghost host, is still there. Now, that doesn't mean they can't take him out. That doesn't mean it's not, that it means this is a permanent situation. They're never going to change that scene. You may or may not have heard that there's a rumor that Disney's thinking about updating the stretching room to be a projection like Jack is. Jack is a projection instead of a practical effect for the classic Haunted Mansion with the hanging ghost. They were thinking about changing that scene to be projection for regular Haunted Mansion as well, and in the process, possibly changing how the ghost host appears there. As of today, as of the recording of this video, the hanging ghost is still hanging in the rafters. Stretching room is the same. The portraits don't appear to have changed at all. One thing I did notice is if you look to your left, it's kind of surprised me. I'm not sure if this is new or not. I've never really pointed the camera in this direction during Haunted Mansion Holiday, but there are some Nightmare Before Christmas characters. I believe that's Lock, Shock, and Barrel back there behind that window. This whole wall and these windows was rebuilt again. It was replaced anew. So all these, the windows and the wall is all brand new again. Not that anybody would notice as you go through the mansion, which is good, the way it should be. But the portrait hall looks about the same, as does this scene here with the ghost that stare at you. Although in the old footage, you can see some lights there where it says ho ho ho. I mean, that's not a big deal if they don't bring that back. And it's possible they might bring it back still later on when we get closer to the holiday season, you know, on August 23rd. We'll get on our Doom buggy. And this scene will be pretty much unchanged. What you see here will be pretty much unchanged, except for the corridor of doors right there. As you pass by the "let me out of here" guy, you can see it's kind of difficult to see here because it was dark and my camera doesn't do as well in low light as a fancy cam would. That is the bat in a cage. That bat in the cage appeared for about a week last year, right next to the chair, you know, in the where Zero and his bowl is, in the chair, the Museum of the Weird chair. Right next to that chair for a week was that bat in a cage, and then it was gone. They took it out for some reason. Nobody knows why. It is back, and now instead of next to the chair, it is here along the hallway in the corridor of doors. That's a Mark Davis drawn piece of concept art. It was just concept art for decades, but it found its way into the mansion just like that chair did. Raleigh Crump designed that chair, and for that matter, the cat that appears in the queue before you get on your Doom buggy. And they had never appeared in the attraction until recent times. And this year we get our third piece of concept art come to life in the Haunted Mansion. Actually, there will be a fourth we'll get to in a minute. Everything from that point on until we get to the attic is as it was. But when we do get to the attic, the most notable thing we'll see first is that the head of the snake that sort of meanders itself all the way through the attic and is eating the Christmas list of, you know, kids and whether or not they're on the naughty or nice list. The head of that snake has moved from the right side of the queue to the left side of the queue. He is now on your left. The body is all over the place, but the head itself is on the left. And actually, just as you look to the left of the snake head, you can see our fourth piece of concept art that came to life in this attraction. This actually happened last year. He's back again this year. That's the Candleman. That's another Raleigh Crump piece of concept art from the Museum of the Weird. He's being represented here now in the queue, in the attraction. But that's not the biggest deal. When we arrive at where the bride would be. Okay, guys, this is it. This is the thing that I've teased in the beginning of the video. And in the title and everything, this could be a real game changer for fans of the Haunted Mansion. Not for Haunted Mansion Holiday, but for original Haunted Mansion, classic Haunted Mansion. We're not going to see how it plays out here, but what we can see are signs of what is to happen. Hold that thought real quick. Let's take a look at these two Jack-in-the-Boxes. There used to be just the one. Now there are two. You've got a jack-o'-lantern coming out of the Jack-in-the-Box on the left, a Jack face coming out of the Jack-o'-lantern or the Jack-in-the-Box on the right. People are speculating that clown face on the box on the left is Jangles from Inside Out 2. And people are speculating that the clown face on the right is Krusty the Clown from The Simpsons. Maybe, could be. They are close enough to make the argument that that's what they are, but also different enough that you can make an argument that they're not. And that's by design, by the way. Disney wouldn't, if they wanted to represent Krusty the Clown, they're not going to just put Krusty's face on there. They're obviously going to want to pay. It's a nod, an homage. It's going to evoke that character, but not be an exact representation of either Jangles or Krusty the Clown. But it would be interesting if that is what, in fact, they were doing here. I mean, he does look like Krusty to me, but different enough that I would agree or believe you if you said it wasn't. Okay, so there's that. Now, the first thing that I noticed when coming through here is that. See that piece of darkness bisecting the frame right there? That is a wooden support. That is a stud, as it were. That was definitely not there before. Move just a little bit further and you can see another one right there on the right behind that gift. You've now got 2 studs creating a space, a square space that did not exist before. Why is it necessary to build 2 wooden supports there, 2 studs? I don't know. Also notice, well, actually, I do. I have an idea. I don't know, but I have a very good idea. Also, you'll notice that this situation is sort of pivoted. It's now facing, it's turning a little bit more towards, it's facing the opposite side. She used to face you directly. You were when you made that turn, you were coming at the bride. She would be looking right at you. Now she's kind of looking a little bit to your right. They've shifted her position to face the track a little bit rather than you. It's subtle, but there's a reason for that, I think, as well. Behind those 2 Jack-in-the-Boxes is a curtain. There's more to the scene behind it. We just can't see it. It's a black curtain. Can't really tell what's going on back there, but it's there nonetheless. This scene is actually deeper than we are being presented here in this situation. There is more happening behind that curtain. I believe, we've already heard the rumor that they have replaced the bride with a practical animatronic. As we know her now, she's just basically a mannequin that just stands there and they project a face on her and she speaks to you. And it's kind of okay. It's kind of okay. So we've heard the rumor they're going to replace the projected face with a practical animatronic, which is great because practical is always better than projection. But now that I see this scene, it makes me understand better why they decided to replace the projection with a practical animatronic, because it's more than just making her practical again. That's not the goal. The goal isn't just to make her practical again. I believe that there's going to be a whole scene played out here. I had heard, another rumor that I heard is that they're going to lean into the window scene. In the original story of the Haunted Mansion, the original backstory is that the bride discovered the ghost host's history, that he was a pirate, a bloodthirsty pirate, Captain Gideon Gorlou. And she discovered his secret, who he was, and he found out and he killed her. And it's her ghost that haunts him. Her ghost, after he killed her, she haunts him and he winds up hanging himself in the stretching room. He killed her by pushing her out a window that's in the attic. And that the situation where as guests pass the Hatbox Ghost and your doom buggy rotates and now you are falling backwards. Your back is to the track. That's supposed to represent you, the bride, falling out the window. I believe that they're going to give life to that scene and we're going to see her in some way appear to fall out a window behind her. And so that requires a whole setup, a whole, motorized setup to create a scene that makes that happen. I don't know anything. This is pure speculation on my part. I have not, the only thing that I have heard rumor-wise was that they were replacing projection with practical. And I believe I heard somewhere else that they might put a window behind her. But seeing this setup the way it is has made me believe that there's more to this. It's going to be more involved, more interesting than just a replacement with a practical effect. Again, I don't know. I haven't seen or heard anything. Nobody's talking to me. This is pure guess. So if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. It's not a prediction per se. It's not like I'm, starting a rumor. It is just my belief based on what I'm seeing. And I could be wrong. I absolutely could be wrong. But those supports are necessary for some reason. I don't feel like they would have put those in if they didn't have a larger purpose for the scene. Hatbox goes the same, and now we're falling back. This is what I'm talking about here. We're falling backwards. We're falling out the window. We are dying, and now we are in the graveyard. Some folks mentioned, by the way, in the first release of this video that it looked like Jack was missing his arm. He is not missing his arm. His right arm. His arm is actually, that's him holding his sack of Christmas presents. it's bent behind him so that he can hold the sec. He's holding it over his shoulder. There is a full arm there. It's just folded back behind him. That's the way it's always looked. Nothing has changed on that. Nothing has changed in the graveyard. Sally, all the ghosts, the pumpkins singing. All of this appears to be the same to me. If there are any changes, it's completely inconsequential. And then arriving at Oogie Boogie, that scene is the same. But one thing we have heard in the past, when you get to this final scene with the mirrors, we were told that Disney was going to replace the practical effect with a digital effect. These are now projections. That does appear to be the case. Before, the president would just sort of sit there in front of you. But now, today, it fades into the mirror and then it kind of oscillates there a little bit, rotates back and forth. So it looks better to me, in my opinion. I think that's better than how it was before. I'm not bothered at all by replacing the practical effect with this projection. It's a very small part of the show. I will note, however, those little pop-up lock, shock, and barrels, those guys are still there. They still pop up into the mirror as you go by. That is our before and after of the Haunted Mansion holiday. What do you guys think? Do you think I'm right? I would love to hear from anybody who knows anything about building sets and why you think those two supports are necessary, and if I'm at all near correct on my assumptions. I just don't feel like it's, they're not necessary for show, so there must be some other purpose. And in terms of, that's why I mentioned the way the scene appears to have pivoted a little bit by like maybe 15, 20 degrees, is so that they can have something behind her, because her back used to be against a wall, and now her back is going to be against a window. And that's why they had to pivot that scene a little bit. It makes a lot of sense. Everything kind of lines up. But let me know your thoughts, Fresh Baked. And as always, if you like this show and want to show your support, please do consider joining our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/freshbaked. You can follow us on Instagram at _freshbaked, on Twitter at freshbakedisney, that's fresh with no E, and on TikTok at freshbakedisney. Otherwise, we'll see you guys next time. We love you. Be safe out there. Be kind to one another. And Fresh Baked.